All right, my name's Chuck Beatty, and I'm a former Sea Organization, which is the sort of fake religious order of Scientology, which is, you know, about the 5,000 people that were the lifetime staff members. So I retired in 2003 after 7 years on the Rehabilitation Project Force, which is a euphemistic name for the prison, camp, and the thought reform system. And in some respects, I didn't mind the RPF. I like the outdoor work. I like manual labor. I like farm work. My heritage is from farmers and stuff like that. And my goal, even prior to getting Scientology, was to go work on one of these communes out in California. So it just so happens that I did 4 years on the cult compound, which was semi-communal. There wasn't any spousal relationships.
Did you say 40 years?
Four.
Okay.
4 years. I was 4 years out there in the Happy Valley. It's got a great name. It's called Happy Valley, and that's its real name. And so I know most of the people, but basically what I've done since getting out is encourage the people that I know who should speak out to speak out, and try to get them, you know, past the point, because back in the early 2000s, there was only like a handful of people. There was a guy, the former staff section officer, John Peeler, was speaking out. Karen Schless-Presley was speaking out. Nancy Maney hadn't quite fully come out, and other guys hadn't yet come out. So I knew that some people had come out, and some of the people had anonymously phoned me and told me about the violence. So then I was spreading the violence story in end of 2005, I think it was, or 2006. And but the people that had experienced the violence weren't quite ready to speak. So there was a little window of time then when I became sort of like the focal point of the ex-members. And I also was working with Professor Stephen Kent, who was getting a lot of media on Scientology, and then also Professor Dave Turetsky. They would throw media at me, and then I would in turn ask the former members to talk to the media. And then I've always been a media supporter, and I've always believed that the fourth estate, you know, the media is going to have the greatest impact long range because they're so flexible. And then it was a matter of getting enough people telling their stories. So basically all of the people that came out were bigger cheeses than me, so, you know, that was it. After about 2006, I then started, somebody else suggested that I run the 800 number, so today I run an 800 number, so ex-Sea Org members can call me, and then I network them to other ex-Sea Org members, their friends or something like that. And then actually what it's actually turned into is sort of like the parent and family member, cult member hotline, and I just give people reality on what it's like, and basically how long it'll be before their kids finally quit, because there's such a massive quit ratio as far as like the lifetime staff, the Sea Organization. It's almost guaranteed. If somebody's a beginner, they'll quit within 3 to 4 months. So that's what I do today. But in my career in the Sea Organization, I basically was, I originally was working at Flag, you know, in Clearwater, training up to be a Class 12. I only made it to like, I think grade 3, which is not very far. And then I bombed out, and then I became a course supervisor, which is sort of the classroom training supervisor, but only for the administrative trainees. And then over the next 6 years, I then became very proficient with the administrative rules and systems, only because when you're teaching the future executives of the church, you have to understand all of their questions and all their queries. So I then had to learn all the things that I didn't know about the whole hierarchy of the movement. So then I became somewhat of an expert. After that, I then worked on a 6-year project extracting Hubbard's administrative kernels of wisdom and staff duties and turning them into an in-house sort of like business forms telling the staff what to do. So my first 10 years in the movement, I basically became somewhat expert in the administrative hierarchy and history and knew all the names of people, because in the course of answering the executive students' questions, I would ask for a lot of history questions, and then I talked to the old Apollo veterans from the ship days, and those guys are really fascinating. They have a lot of great stories, and those are the people I really wanted to speak out. Like Ken Urquhart should actually get a lot more attention today. And then I'm even hopeful that someday some of the ex-Guardians office, big cheeses like Jane Kember, will even speak out. And I got to tell you, 2 years before Marty was speaking out, if you could look back on Alt Religion Scientology chat sign, I said, we need to get some bigger cheeses speaking out like Marty. And in 2007, at one of Patty's parties, I'm standing there on the street with my Free Mike Rinder sign. Free Mike Rinder in 2007, a year, I think he had just blown, but I think it took him another like 8 months before he eventually did stuff. So when you're an ex-member, you kind of can see what's going to happen to the other people. And there are these decade by decade patterns in what goes on with Scientology. The solid form of the movement itself, there's just so much writing, and it's not even been touched, not even by Professor Hugh Urban in his book, not by any of the other books, and none of the new religious movement scholars are going into the green volumes, which is the hierarchical rule system, which keeps all the drones working in Los Angeles and just keeps those young individuals that get on and off the buses in Clearwater that one of the protesters, Darth Zander, takes great videos of. Those kids, all they do is they go in a course room and they study Hubbard. They study Hubbard from morning, noon, and night. There's no more outside study except in at the end of the day between midnight and 1 a.m. if you pull out a paperback and read it under the covers, in your birthing. So they really have a tough time really ever getting back out of the mindset once you get into the Hubbard mindset, because he's an entertaining writer. He's a hype sort of writer. Now, not for a sophisticated, well-read person. Hubbard is you want to gag, he's like a horrible writer. But for somebody who hasn't necessarily done a lot of reading and is open to a lot of talk about past lives, science fiction, and all these crazy ideas about the universe, which are still open questions, like when Stephen Hawking goes and says, it's very likely that, people live on other planets, you could even see how Scientology has a foot in the door. The bad part is there's a whole totalitarian rule system. It's a massive catch-22 system, and that's been Jerry Armstrong on his site and his wife Caroline have majorly exposed the totalitarian system, and they've done an excellent job of focusing on the suppressive person doctrines of Hubbard, which are the major blackmail control system of the whole movement. So that's always relevant, and that's one of the big things that all the celebrities hate, when they get disconnected. And even some of the new religious movement scholars, even Gordon Melton, admits that the modern shunning, the extremist shunning of Scientology is just overboard. It just isn't good for them. I mean, it's not good for any group to have that kind of extremist shunning. And it's institutionalized, and then you have a pyramid structure. Unfortunately, Scientology is a pyramid structure with really the power at the top. The decision maker is David Miscavige. The other people listen to what he says, and they only do what he says. And if they ever countermand anything he says, they're toast. They're basically, they end up doing lower conditions and, eating beans and rice and going through a whole period of, where they have to do their amends and so forth to get back in good graces with him and stuff like that. So blah, blah, blah. So basically, my role has been on the chat sites, digging out a lot more details, getting a lot more discussion going through those couple of years, which I was very heavily into that. Like from 2004, I went public, and when I ran into trouble, when the first time I got a lawyer who called me on the phone, Elliot Abelson, who was then their top lawyer, he called me, and I go, within 5 minutes, I called up Jerry Armstrong and said, help, what do I do? the top lawyer called me, what do I do? Arnie Lerma is another person who hasn't gotten a lot of credit. Arnie Lerma did so much in the 90s, and he's just a vicious sort of in-your-face critic. I mean, he's he's even stronger and harsher than Skip Press. And Skip Press is a brilliant critic, and Skip, because of all of his history with the celebrities throughout the 70s, and then a lot of the people like Karen Schless Presley, she was also worked at CC. Nancy Maney worked at CC. Skip Press worked at CC. So there's been, and then Spanky Taylor, who with Lawrence Wright's recent book. So there's been a lot over the years, more and more people who've had, you know, serious FaceTime with some of the serious players have gone public and told, you know, the other side of the story. But, you know, Lawrence Wright's book is just brilliant. I don't know what you... Me today, I'm a kind of, I only have probably 5 or 6 serious phone calls a year on the 800 number. What's happened and what we noticed, meaning the other ex-Sea Org members who have been helping other people, you know, come stay with them as soon as they get out. Like when Mike Rinder quit, he went to Ronnie Miscavige. When other people, like other senior people quit, they'd go ask Janice Grady and people in Las Vegas. So you kind of go to who you know and stuff like that. Sometimes people come to me and then I always refer them to someplace else. And then I always, I mainly basically deal today on the 800 number with family members. Like the parents asking, my son or daughter got in the Sea organization, how's it gonna go? I basically just tell them how it's gonna go, be patient, they'll be out in 8 months. You know what I mean? Something like that. Because that's what happens. The system grinds people up. They're not ready for it. They lie about it. I mean, like the Sea Organization recruiters. If you were to go up and down like L. Ron Hubbard Boulevard, there's the Sea Org recruitment for the PAC base, for the blue building there. Those are the people that on a weekly basis, Thursday to Thursday, are trying to get the new people to man up the PAC base there, all of the complex of buildings. And I think it's important to understand what the buildings are. The Advanced Organization, Los Angeles, is really the exorcism center for Scientology for Western United States. And people don't realize that that's where you learn how to do the exorcism. And that's one aspect of Scientology. It's not been honestly and neutrally discussed, is really what does Scientology consist of. The lower levels is therapy, and then it's basically a PTSD trauma therapy, and then it's a past lives trauma therapy, if you believe in past lives. And you have to believe in past lives before the Xenu story makes any sense. And then the upper story, I mean, once you get the Xenu story, that explains why you need to do exorcism. And then, every continental region of Scientology around the world has their exorcism church. Sydney has the exorcism church. St. Hill has his exorcism church. Copenhagen has an exorcism church. Los Angeles has the exorcism church. Johannesburg has, I think, the exorcism church now. So I think there might be one more. And then, of course, Flag has the whole shebang. And so that's why, I mean, really, if you're talking in terms of my views today on Scientology, I say that it's kind of like very much a franchise system. And it funnels people up. It identifies, all of the lower churches are essentially feeder systems. So I have a lot of contrary opinions compared to a lot of people. I've given a lot of thought, and I understand the inside administrative nuts and bolts. I know what keeps the people drones there. At the end of the day, when they go and they put their head on their pillow, they're thinking L. Ron Hubbard. The next day, they're going to go to class for 2.5 hours. They study 12.5 hours. The staff study 12.5 hours a day. I was chasing all the staff up to come to study and keep them noses to the grindstone. They have to study the Keeping Scientology Working policy maybe 500 to 1,000 times in their 40-year career. Sometimes they have to method 9 it. I've method 9'd it, which is read it word by word, making sure. And I've read the whole thing perfectly with no hesitation. And it's an absurd document, but it's a completely over-the-top, excellent summary of L. Ron Hubbard, that document alone. So I think the focus by Jerry and Caroline on that one is very important. Miscavige today exemplifies some of those writings, and I've written on some of the chat sites, some of the things, some of the specific writings from Hubbard that he's exemplifying today, which is like, always look like $1 million. Everybody wants to know, why does he always look like $1 million? Well, Hubbard said that the value of an ASI staff member was he had to make for ASI, for Hubbard, for the Hubbard estate, at least $1 million per staff member a year. And Miscavige made sure that through his actions that Author Services absorbed at least $1 million a year. So he continues to take, I'm almost positive. Now some people think, and I wasn't close enough to know how sociopathic is. I mean, like the other people that have lived like Rinder and Marty, I only look at Miscavige of how he might be exemplifying Hubbard's writings, but unfortunately I think he's just gone as a human being. He's in a serious control thing, you know, Machiavellian, like out of control. And that's what happens. That's one of the unfortunate things for cults is you have the top cult leader can do no wrong, and nobody can hold him accountable except the ex-members that were around him. And that's why it's so important for all the people that know Miscavige to tell their stories, all of their stories, and actually share that with the membership.
All right, David, got anything else? Sure, the RPF. Tell us about the RPF real short.
Well, there's an RPF. Professor Stephen Kent should be coming out with a book in the next 10 or 20 years. Kidding. He's already like overdue by 15 years on the book, but he's the world's expert on the RPF. He's already done papers, professional papers. He's serious. And he's got serious grad students that do papers on Scientology up at the University of Alberta. Yeah, the Canadians are like, Canadians are seriously good.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I want to ask you one question, especially with the news that broke yesterday.
What was that?
Arrowhead Medical Detox
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Losing their
Yes.
temporary permit. What's your thoughts on the Narconon program and all of the front rooms?
Okay, my thoughts on Narconon are that it's an extreme overextension of a grandiose megalomaniac person, L. Ron Hubbard, thinking that his ideas, which he just pulls out of his brain, are so important that he doesn't have to follow the rules. And he's never operated that way. And then he's institutionalized groups of people that just basically get hoodwinked in carrying along his delusions. So unfortunately, that is truly what goes on unfortunately with the Narconon. It seems so official because you have this whole series of courses, and I know how engulfing those courses are. Those courses are extremely engulfing and time-consuming, and you're scheduled just like in the Narconons. You're scheduled exactly like you are in the Sea Organization. You're basically Sea Organization members when you go in there as a patient, and it's founded on dozens and dozens of Hubbard scriptures, and of course it's been conclusively proven. You sit there and it says based on the words of L. Ron Hubbard. Of course it is. In fact, if you look in the church quote-unquote scriptures, there are therapeutic TRs, training routines, the sit-down drills that you do. I mean, it's all based on his stuff. And then the key book that is so underappreciated is Martin Gardner, a mathematician and a philosopher and a top intellectual. His book is called Fads and Fallacies. He lays waste to L. Ron Hubbard in the 1950s and puts him in context of the other crank pseudoscience people. Hubbard never washed clean of his complete crank pseudoscience nature. And I think one of the people that is best really understands that is his great-grandson, Jamie DeWolf. Seeing him speak, he's conclusive. Now he's like somebody who could possibly somewhat apologize for L. Ron Hubbard. The movement will never be able to apologize for him. And then one last thing I'd like to on Narconon. There are more people that might take another couple of years. Some senior members, some former senior members. Like for instance, there's a scribe class, the ones who take Hubbard's works, pre-select all the stuff out, put it into those nice little Narconon booklets. The lady who did that probably will never go public because she thinks of the good works that Narconon did, but I think one of the realizations the ex-members usually come to, like Jason Begay did, you realize that the people of Scientology have their innate goodness. Like you wanted to do good, but then you're shuffled along in a whole bunch of false presumptions and pseudoscience, unfortunately. And then you're selling it, and then you're validated for selling it. You're conditioned into selling it. All of the great, like Luke Catton, give me a break. He was just an exemplary role model. He's handsome. He gets definitely patted on the back. Scientology has this like a gold SAR system that they paste on people down pat. I mean, Hubbard used a lot of methods to keep his whole big operation going. So Narconon, I hope this causes them to have a serious stumble. We'll see, but each country is different. And the teams, the OSA teams, which are called the Department of Special Affairs team members in each one of the continents, they are the ones that follow the Hubbard script, which say to go out to the the appropriate opinion leaders in the areas, secure the endorsements to keep the whole scam going locally. So you got to realize that the Hubbard system, unfortunately, is a strong system in its written system. It's a man who was a pulp fiction writer, so if you think about it, his writing style wasn't like overly pompous and stuff like that, even though it's completely bombastic and like, what do you call it? It's like he's claiming things which are just delusional about what you can achieve with this stuff. These are seriously good.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.